Ayana didn't respond. She simply opened the door and stepped out, taking in the stillness of the neighborhood. The air smelled like dry grass and old wood. She could already feel the eyes, curtains shifting, silhouettes pausing. A black car slowed as it passed by, the driver glancing at her face with curiosity that felt like something colder. She was used to it. Her father had warned her. People fear what they don't understand. Stay centered. Inside, the house was old but well kept. A photo of her and her father from years ago hung crookedly in the hall, both of them in Aikido uniforms, him towering behind her, hands on her shoulders, his expression unreadable. Ayana moved through the rooms slowly, taking in the dust, the history. She wasn't afraid, but there was something heavy about this town. It clung to her skin. On Monday morning, she stood in front of the mirror, dressed in the standard Bellwood High uniform. Navy skirt, white blouse, blazer. Her movements were precise as she braided her hair and tied it off with a dark band. The mirror reflected someone unreadable. Behind her, Yuki's voice called, "Remember what your father always says. Calm is power." Ayana nodded. She remembered more than words. She remembered hours on the mat, sweat and bruises, the sharp clap of her father's hands as he corrected her form. Discipline, control, restraint. Bellwood High looked like every other suburban school she had seen in the movies. Large windows, red brick, a wide front lawn. The students gathered in loose groups, most of them white, a few Latino, fewer still black or Asian. As Ayana walked through the main gate, the noise shifted slightly. Conversations dipped, eyes turned. She walked with calm steps, eyes forward, shoulders relaxed. She found her locker, opened it, and placed her books inside. She did not look around. She did not flinch. Her first classes passed quietly, but not without notice. In chemistry, the boy next to her leaned over and asked, "Where? Are you from? Korea?" She shook her head once. "Japan," he grinned. "Figures. You all are like silent warriors or something." The teacher didn't intervene. In English, someone whispered the word Kung Fu Barbie behind her back. She didn't turn. She simply continued to take notes. The whispers followed her down the hall, trailing her like smoke. At lunch, she sat under a tree in the courtyard alone, pulling out a neatly wrapped bento box her mother had prepared. The smell of rice and pickled vegetables reached the nearest table, and a group of cheerleaders wrinkled their noses. "Oh," one of them muttered. "What even is that?" "Probably bat soup," said another. They laughed. Ayana finished her meal in silence. By the end of the first week, her name was well known, not because she sought attention, but because she didn't speak. She didn't react. And in a place like Bellwood, that made her a target. One afternoon, as she was leaving math class, she turned the corner and found herself face to face with him. Track, quarterback, son of Sheriff Brower, 6'2", blonde, confident, and already smirking. "You the new ninja girl?" he asked, loud enough for others to hear. "Or are you just mute?" The kids behind him laughed. Ayana's gaze didn't change. "Excuse me," she said softly and tried to step past, but he blocked her path. "I asked you a question." His voice wasn't angry, it was amused. But behind the amusement, there was a challenge. "I heard your dad's some washed-up action star," Tracky continued. "Plays tough guys in movies, teaches girls how to bow and sweep the floor." Ayana met his eyes for the first time. "You're mistaken," she said. "He teaches how not to strike unless you must." The group behind Track oohed and laughed again, but Track's smile faded slightly. He moved aside with a mock bow. "After you, Sensei." The next incident came fast. In PE, during a relay, Track accidentally knocked Ayana over during a handoff. She hit the ground hard. The coach looked away. The other students laughed. "Careful," Track said. "Don't want to damage your pretty little dojo brain." That night, Ayana sat in her room and stared at the ceiling. Her muscles ached, not from the fall, but from the restraint, from the pressure. She opened her phone and looked at a photo. Her and her father standing beside a shrine in Kyoto. She remembered his voice. When the world pushes, don't push back, move around it. She closed her eyes and repeated the mantra he had made her. Learn in 3 languages: calm, control, precision. But in Bellwood, those things felt like weakness, and weakness was blood in the water. The final blow came on Friday. As she approached her locker, she noticed the words scrawled across it. In red marker, "Go back to China." Underneath, someone had drawn slanted eyes in a mock kung fu pose. Her breath caught, but not in pain, in heat, in pressure. A student behind her whispered, "Should have stayed in Tokyo Drift." Laughter followed. Ayana opened her locker, placed her books inside, and closed it without saying a word. She walked away. That night, in the quiet of the living room, she sat with her mother in silence. On the screen, an old movie played, Above the Law. Her father, younger, fast and calm, dismantled 6 attackers with smooth practice movements. "He never raised his voice," Ayana said softly. Her mother nodded. "And he never raised his hand unless he had no choice." Ayana's eyes were steady. "But what if no one else is going to stop them?" she asked. Yuki looked at her daughter, then at the screen. "Then you show them what balance looks like." In that moment, something shifted in Ayana's chest. Not rage, not revenge, resolve, quiet and unshakable. The kind that lives in shadows, the kind her father had taught her to wield. She would not fight, not yet, but she would no longer bow her head. Let them watch, let them wonder. She would let the storm come, and when it did, she would already be standing. Ayana moved through the following week like a shadow, present but untouchable. She spoke when spoken to, turned in her assignments on time, and answered every question in class with calm clarity. But nothing she did seemed to matter. The mockery, the whispers, the sideways glances, they intensified. Someone left fake fortune cookies on her desk, each one with a racist message inside. "Karate chop your way back home." Silent but sneaky. She never touched them. She never reacted. But each word left a mark deeper than any bruise. The worst came during gym. The class was doing wrestling drills, boy versus girl. The coach allowed it, calling it equal opportunity. Ayana was paired with a junior named Dylan, a thick-necked lineman with more muscle than technique. When he lunged, Ayana sidestepped him effortlessly and tapped his back to the mat. He grunted and got up. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. On the second round, he tried harder, lunged fast, grabbed her arm, but again she twisted out and forced him down in a clean motion. The class went silent. The coach raised a brow but said nothing. Dylan got up slowly. "Yo," he barked. "You cheating or what? What is this? Some ninja crap?" Laughter followed. Track, sitting on the bleachers, called out, "Must be her old man's. Movie magic." Ayana looked toward him. His smirk was smug, lazy, and full of something poisonous. For a moment, her hands clenched. She could hear her father's voice in her memory. "If you let them control your emotions, they already win." She let go. That evening, Ayana walked the long way home. Her mother worked a double shift at the clinic, and the neighborhood was quiet. She moved through the back streets, the sky a dusky orange. At the corner of Maple and 6th, a low-slung black Dodge Charger pulled up and slowed. Track was behind the wheel. The window rolled down. "Hey, Tokyo," he called. "Need a ride?" Ayana didn't stop walking. He laughed. "What? Don't like American muscle or just scared of it?" She didn't answer. He revved the engine, threw an empty soda can out the window, and sped off with a screech. When she arrived home, the house was dark. She entered quietly, dropped her backpack, and went to the back porch. There, under the overhang, was a small patch of mat her father had laid down years ago when they'd visited for a summer. It was old, dusty, but solid. Ayanna stood barefoot in the twilight and began to move. Her feet slid over the mat in fluid rhythm, her arms flowing in circles, her breath steady. She practiced rolls, shifts, evasion. Her body remembered what her mind had buried. She didn't move with violence. She moved with control, the same way her father had taught her, the same way he lived. Her skin glistened with sweat, her heart calm. She practiced until night fully fell. Inside the house, her phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number, a video clip. She opened it. The image showed her walking down the hallway earlier that day, Track just behind her. The camera zoomed as he accidentally brushed her shoulder and whispered something in her ear. The caption read, "Watch out, she's going to kung fu your dog." Ayanna stared at it for a long moment. Then she put the phone down. Later that night, her mother came home and found her daughter cleaning the mat with slow, careful movements. "I thought you gave this up," Yuki said quietly. "I thought I did too," Ayanna replied. "But it's not about fighting." Yuki sat down beside her. "No," she agreed. "It never was." The next day, the tension in school was thick. Everyone had seen the video. No teachers addressed it. No administrators called her in. Ayanna walked through the halls with quiet, unbothered grace. Her uniform was sharp, her braid tight, her step measured. In biology class, someone had placed soy sauce packets on her desk in the shape of a smiley face. She gathered them, carried them to the front, and placed them gently into the trash can. Then she returned to her seat and continued reading. At lunch, she sat under the tree again. A girl from the volleyball team glanced at her from a nearby bench but looked away quickly when Ayanna met her eyes. Across the courtyard, Track watched her from his usual spot, surrounded by teammates, laughing like nothing had changed. But his eyes kept drifting back to her. Her calm unnerved him. Her silence provoked him more than any outburst could have. That evening, Yuki received a call from a blocked number. A deep voice with a strange calm said, "Your daughter is dangerous. Maybe you should take her back to wherever she came from." The police filed a report, but promised little. Ayanna, listening from the kitchen, said nothing. She went outside and stretched again on the mat. Her body moved as if dancing with ghosts, ghosts of balance, of clarity, of the warrior her father raised. The following Monday, she found her locker vandalized again. This time the words were etched in deep gouges. China doll, paint dripped. From the corners, red, intentional. She stood in front of it and breathed. Behind her, footsteps approached. "What's the matter?" Track said from behind, his voice light. "Lost your sense of humor?" Ayanna turned slowly. Her voice was low even. "I'm from Japan, but I think you already knew that." He smirked, eyes narrowing. "You think you're better than us walking around? Like some kind of samurai princess?" Ayanna didn't blink. "No, I just don't think about you at all." That struck something. His hand shot forward, but before he could touch her, she sidestepped. He stumbled slightly. The hallway went quiet. Students froze. Ayanna spoke calmly, just loud enough. "Next time you raise your hand, I'll treat it like an attack." And then she walked away. The moment passed like thunder, low but rumbling far beneath the surface. At home, Ayanna waited until her mother was asleep. Then she pulled out her phone and called a number she hadn't dialed in months. It rang once, then again. Then a familiar voice answered. "Ayanna?" the voice asked. She closed her eyes. "Dad," she whispered. "I need you." There was a pause. Then the calm, steely voice of Steven Seagal answered, "I'm already on my way." Steven Seagal arrived in Bellwood just after dawn. The black rental car pulled into the driveway of the weathered blue house as the morning fog began to lift. He stepped out slowly, dressed in black from head to toe, loose cotton shirt, dark jeans, tinted glasses. His presence was calm, yet impossible to ignore. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. One older man stepped onto his porch, squinting as if confirming what he saw. It was him. No bodyguards, no entourage, just Steven Seagal in silence. Ayanna was already up. She stood barefoot in the backyard, moving through a sequence of Aikido kata with fluid grace. Her father watched from the doorway, arms folded, face unreadable. When she completed the sequence and turned, their eyes met. No words passed between them for several long seconds. Finally, he stepped forward. "You remembered the breath," he said. Ayanna nodded. "You said the breath controls the pace of the fight." I said the breath controls everything. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Ayanna lowered her eyes slightly, an acknowledgement of respect, not weakness. Later that morning, they sat on the back porch drinking green tea in silence. "I didn't call you to fight my battles," she said at last. "I know," he replied. "I just didn't want to forget who I am." "You haven't," he said. "You called me before. You reacted. That means you're still in control." Ayanna's gaze drifted toward the tall wooden fence that enclosed their yard. "They don't care who I am," she said. "They only care that I don't belong." Steven leaned forward slightly, his voice low and deliberate. "The world doesn't hand you belonging, Ayanna. You create space with stillness, with precision, not noise." She nodded slowly. "Are you ready to train for real?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." From that day, their backyard became a dojo. Every morning before school and every evening after sundown, Steven trained her. Not with brute force, but with redirection, breathing, grounded movement. She already knew the techniques. He refined them, sharpened them, stripped away everything unnecessary. "No wasted motion," he would say. "No wasted emotion." He had brought wooden practice weapons in a black case, Joe staffs, Tanto knives, Bakken. They moved in silence, only the sound of feet brushing against grass or staff against staff. It was the old way. Ayanna's body began to change again, not just in strength, but in intention. Her walk became more silent, her shoulders more relaxed. Her eyes, when she looked in the mirror, no longer held doubt. They held readiness. At school, she returned to the same seat, under the same tree. But now the stares lingered differently. Some were still cruel, some unsure, some curious, but no one laughed anymore, and no one touched her. Until Thursday. It started in the locker room after gym. Her sneakers were missing. In their place was a folded piece of paper taped to the bench. She opened it. "Run back to your dojo, China girl." There was a crude drawing of a geisha kneeling before a Confederate flag. Ayanna stared at it for a long time. Then she folded the note, placed it in her backpack, and walked out in her socks. As she stepped into the hallway, a voice called out behind her. "Forgot your shoes, Mulan?" She turned. Track stood at the end of the corridor, leaning casually against a locker. His voice was light, but his eyes were hard. "Heard your dad's in town," he said. "Guess that means you need protection now." Ayanna didn't answer. He stepped closer. "Going to bring him to school? Let him kung fu all the bullies?" She stepped forward too, matching him pace for pace. "I don't need him to fight my battles," she said. "But you should pray he doesn't see what you've been doing." That wiped the smile from his face. For just a second his confidence cracked, but then it returned, more venomous. "You don't scare me," he said. "You're not supposed to be scared," she said softly. "You're supposed to be better." She turned and walked away. He didn't follow. That night, Ayanna told her father everything: the locker room, the notes, the vandalism. She didn't cry, she didn't raise her voice, but Steven watched her closely, noting the quiet fury behind her eyes. "You know," he said, "there's a difference between silence and submission." Ayanna nodded. "I've been learning the difference. Then it's time to choose your moment." She looked at him. "How will I know when it's right?" "You won't," he said, "but your center will." The next day at school was unusually quiet, as if everyone was waiting for something. It came during lunch. Ayanna had just sat at her usual table. When Track approached, alone, no posse. He leaned down on the table and smirked. "Still haven't said thank you." "For what?" she asked without looking up. "For all the attention. You're practically famous now." "I didn't ask for any of it. Doesn't matter. You're the show, so let's give them something to remember." Without warning, he picked up her lunch tray and dumped it on her lap. The entire courtyard froze. Rice, soy sauce, chicken spilled across her skirt. Silence, then laughter. Ayanna stood up slowly, dripping with food, eyes fixed on his. Track grinned. "Oops." Students pulled out phones. Cameras rolled. Ayanna didn't flinch. She wiped her hands with a napkin, set the tray aside, and looked at him squarely. "After school, stadium parking lot," she said. He blinked. "If you win, I'll transfer. I'll disappear. But if I win, you leave me alone. You apologize to everyone." His eyes narrowed. "Is this a challenge?" "It's a choice," she said. "If you want to keep pretending you're king of this place, meet me there." The courtyard buzzed like a hive. Whispers spread like wildfire. Students stared between them in disbelief. Track looked around. He couldn't say no, not in front of everyone. His ego wouldn't allow it. "You're on," he said. "Just don't cry when it's over." Ayanna turned and walked away, her back soaked in sauce, but her shoulders straight. That evening, as the sky dimmed and the wind picked up, she stood behind the school in black sneakers and a gray hoodie. Her father waited nearby, leaning against the fence, but saying nothing. He was only there to witness. Track arrived with a handful of friends, each with their phones ready. Some teachers were present too, pretending not to watch. Ayanna stretched, calmly. Track cracked his knuckles. "Let's get this over with." The crowd parted. He lunged first, fast, angry, untrained. She sidestepped, redirected, let him stumble forward. He turned, swung hard. She ducked, blocked, slipped under, and swept. His leg. He hit the pavement, gasps. He stood, red-faced, furious, charged. She spun low, grabbed his arm, used his own momentum to flip him over her hip. He slammed onto his back and stayed there. Ayanna knelt over him lightly, respectfully, her voice low. "This ends here, or next time you won't get up." She rose. Tracky lay stunned. The crowd was silent. Ayanna turned and walked away. From the fence, Steven Seagal nodded once. She didn't just win the fight. She claimed her name. The silence after the fight was louder than any insult Ayanna had endured. The video of her calmly dismantling Track behind the school spread through Bellwood like a flashfire. Within hours, it was circulating through student group chats, neighborhood forums, and even made it to local news sites under headlines like "Teen Martial Artist Destroys Star Quarterback in After-School Showdown." Some called it justice, others called it scandal. At Bellwood High, the atmosphere shifted. Where there had once been whispers and sneers, now there were long stares and even a few nods. No one dared approach her with mockery. Some kept their distance out of fear, others out of shame. Teachers watched her with a new caution, no longer dismissive but unsure. She was no longer the strange, quiet girl. She was that girl, the one who beat Track Brower in front of the whole school and didn't break a sweat. But the victory was far from clean and far from over. That weekend, Sheriff Brower called an emergency meeting at the district school board. He entered the chamber in his polished uniform, radiating authority. Track stood beside him, his arm in a sling and a subtle bruise under his right eye. The image was carefully constructed, the message clear. His statement was broadcast live on the local station. "My son was attacked in what amounted to a premeditated ambush," the sheriff declared. "He was humiliated and physically assaulted by a trained fighter whose father is a known violent man and whose family history is rooted in aggression." The word aggression echoed through the room like a loaded weapon. Steven Seagal watched the footage at home, his expression still as stone. Next to him, Ayanna sat with her arms crossed. "They're going to turn it," she said flatly. "Make me the threat." "You already are to them," Steven replied, "because you didn't break." By Monday morning, the backlash was in full motion. A school-wide email informed families that an investigation had been opened into student-initiated combat on campus grounds. Ayanna was pulled into the counselor's office for a safety assessment. The tone wasn't concerned, it was accusatory. "Principal," Dunley folded his hands across the desk, giving her a patronizing smile. "Ayanna, you're a talented young woman, but this isn't Japan. Here, when we have problems, we talk to an adult. We don't start brawls in the parking lot." "I didn't start anything," she said. "He dumped food on me. I challenged him to a clean match. I defended myself." "You embarrassed the sheriff's son," he said flatly. She met his gaze. "He embarrassed himself. That earned her a 3-day suspension, pending further review." Steven stood beside her at the district office hearing. The room was full. Board members, local press, and a few familiar parents. Sheriff Brower sat near the front, smug and collected. His legal team presented footage, arguing Ayanna's martial arts background made her a weaponized threat, that she had humiliated Track in a public setting and used excessive force that could have caused permanent injury. Then Steven spoke. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He simply stood, hands at his sides, and spoke in a low voice. "My daughter was taught to defend, not to attack. She warned him. She restrained him. She stopped when it was over. That is control. That is discipline. And it's more than your golden boy ever showed." The room shifted. The board murmured. Some members took notes, others looked uncomfortable, but the seed was planted. Still, the harassment escalated. Online, anonymous accounts began posting Ayanna's martial arts competition videos, cut together to make her look violent and unstable. Hashtags like "Mar Dangerous Ayanna" and "Our Bellwood Threat" appeared on local pages. She was called a foreign thug, a trained killer, a publicity stunt. Worse still, her mother, Yuki, began receiving threatening voicemails at the clinic. One night, a brick wrapped in a Confederate flag was thrown through their window. Ayanna stood in the shattered glass and swept it up wordlessly. Steven helped. Her fixed the frame but said nothing. The quiet was heavier than usual. That week, during her suspension, Ayanna volunteered at a local community center. She offered to teach basic self-defense to young girls just an hour each day. At first, only 2 showed up. By the second day, there were 7. By the third, over 20. Girls of all backgrounds, white, black, Latino, Asian, stood barefoot, in rows, copying her movements, repeating her calm instruction. "Your body is not a weapon," she told them. "It's a boundary. You defend it with grace, not rage." Local news caught wind. One reporter interviewed Ayanna on camera. When asked about Track, she said only, "He made a choice. I made mine, but I've moved on." The segment aired that night. The tone was balanced, even sympathetic. Viewers commented with support, but not everyone approved. 2 nights later, Ayanna walked home from the center alone. The air was still. She sensed something as she turned onto their street. A black pickup truck pulled up fast. The driver's door opened. Sheriff Brower stepped out, face flushed red, one hand gripping a bottle, the other clenched at his side. "You think you can humiliate my son?" he slurred. "You think I won't make this right?" Ayanna stopped, calmly adjusted her backpack. "Go home, Sheriff," she said. "You brought this on." "Yourself." He lunged, but she was already moving. She spun to the side, caught his wrist, and twisted, not to hurt, but to stop. She lowered him to the ground in a fluid movement, just as her father had taught her. She didn't strike, she didn't yell, she just restrained. Behind her, headlights appeared. A squad car pulled up. Officers stepped out, blinking in disbelief. They'd seen everything. One officer stepped forward.
"Sheriff Brower, you're under arrest for assault while intoxicated." He sputtered, confused. She attacked me." But Ayanna had already stepped back. Her breathing was steady. The patrol car's dashcam had captured the entire scene. Steven
arrived seconds later. He didn't speak. He just placed a hand on her shoulder. The next morning, Bellwood High was silent again, but for a different reason. The truth was now undeniable. The sheriff was in custody. The girl they had all feared hadn't thrown a punch, only defended herself. That week, the school board lifted Ayanna's suspension and issued a formal apology. But Ayanna didn't return to the cafeteria or the courtyard. She returned to the community center, to the mat, where strength didn't shout. It moved in silence. The dust from the sheriff's arrest had not yet settled when Ayanna returned to Bellwood High, but she didn't come back as the quiet outsider anymore. She walked through the main entrance on Monday morning with her shoulders squared and her eyes forward. Students parted as she passed, not out of fear, but respect. Some nodded. A few murmured, "Hey, Ayanna," under their breath. No one mocked her. No one blocked her path. Track Brower didn't show up that day or the next. Rumors whispered through the halls. Some said his father's arrest had shaken the family to its core. Others claimed they were planning to move. None of it mattered to Ayanna. She had stopped walking in anyone else's shadow. That afternoon during lunch, Principal Dunley called her into his office. But this time his tone was different, less rigid, more careful. "We've decided," he said, "to institute new guidelines. Cultural sensitivity training for staff, a reformed bullying policy, and a student-led self-defense elective, if you're willing." Ayanna said nothing for a moment. Then she nodded once. "I am." The next weeks moved swiftly. The story of what happened in Bellwood gained traction outside the small town. National news picked up the security footage of the sheriff's assault. Editorials began circulating. "Teen girl teaches a town the meaning of discipline," and "When calm beats power, lessons from Bellwood." Journalists requested interviews. Podcasts reached out. A documentary crew even proposed a series. Ayanna declined. Most of them. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol. She was focused on something else, building. Every day after school, she returned to the community center. Her classes now included over 50 students, girls, boys, and even a few adults. She taught not only technique, but mindset. How to remain grounded, how to diffuse tension, how to move with purpose. She used her father's principles, but made them her own. Steven watched often from the back of the room, arms crossed, silent. Sometimes he helped demonstrate a technique, but mostly he let her lead. One evening after class, he approached her as she packed up the mats. "You don't need me here anymore," he said. She looked up. "I never needed you to fight for me." He smiled, just slightly. "No, you needed me to remind you who you are." "You did." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm heading back to LA tomorrow, but call me when you build your next dojo. I want to see it." They stood quietly for a moment. Then Ayanna hugged him, not the way a child clings to a parent, but the way a warrior embraces their teacher. "I love you, Dad." "I know." The following day, Steven was gone. But the work continued. Ayanna received an invitation to speak at Bellwood High's end-of-year ceremony. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't one for speeches, but her mother gently encouraged her. "This town listens to you now," Say something worth hearing. So she did. On the last day of school, Ayanna took the stage in the gymnasium filled with students, staff, and parents. The crowd fell silent as she stepped to the podium in her navy blazer and crisp uniform, her braids sharp and her eyes steady. She looked out over the faces, some familiar, some still wary, and then she spoke. When I first came to Bellwood, she said, I was told that silence meant weakness, that not speaking out made me a target. But what I've learned is that silence is not the same as submission. Silence is space, space to observe, to prepare, to center yourself. She paused. They tried to make me small, but I come from a place that teaches something different. The strongest person in the room is often the quietest because strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it listens, sometimes it waits. She scanned the audience, locking eyes with a few students who had once laughed at her and others who had learned from her. I didn't fight for revenge. I stood up because I knew no one else would. And now I teach others to do the same. Not with fists, but with purpose. With restraint, with dignity. Applause erupted. Some stood, teachers, parents, even classmates who had once kept their distance. Later that week, Bellwood High unveiled a new mural in the main hallway. Ayanna mid-motion, captured in the flowing grace of an Aikido throw. Above her image were words she had spoken that day. Move with purpose, stand with peace. The town had changed, but not because of a fight, because of what came after. Ayanna continued teaching that summer. The community center partnered with regional organizations. Her classes expanded to nearby towns. She founded a program called Still Point, combining self-defense, conflict resolution, and mentorship for youth. Her name appeared in national magazines. She was invited to speak at schools and colleges across the country. But she never forgot where it started, on a cracked backyard mat under the eyes of her father in a town that once didn't want her. Years later, Bellwood High renamed its gymnasium the Steven Seagal Center for Peace and Discipline. Each year, new students walked beneath her portrait. Some knew her story. Some only knew her name. But every one of them understood one thing. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You don't have to fight to win. You just have to stand. You saw the truth right here on YouTube. Now tell us where in the world you're watching from. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to see it.
It was enough. Keane signed a request for emergency approval to execute a limited search of Darren's home. This time, it was granted. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind Winfield's cracked rooftops, a quiet convoy of unmarked vehicles parked along Maple Lane. Officers moved in without sirens, no announcements, just a soft knock and a badge against the glass. Darren opened the door, said nothing, didn't resist, didn't argue, just stepped aside like he'd been waiting for it. The search turned up more than anyone expected. Hidden beneath the floorboards in the back bedroom, officers found a sealed metal box. Inside were 3 undeveloped rolls of film, a torn corner of Eliza's drawing notebook, a broken necklace matching the locket found in the church, and a small piece of yellow fabric crusted with dirt. No blood, no weapon, but the implications were undeniable. Darren was brought in, questioned. He said little, then nothing, then asked for a lawyer. The town of Winfield once again became very small. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to gossip, gossip to disbelief. Some refused to believe it, said Darren was shy, not sinister, said he'd done more for Marie than anyone. Others said they always had a strange feeling, that there was something about him they never quite understood. Marie didn't speak to reporters, didn't return calls. She sat in her daughter's room, holding the notebook page from the box, one that looked torn from a corner of Eliza's sketch pad. It had a single word written in red pencil: help. Darren's attorney refused comment, but under pressure he eventually spoke. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said during a recorded interview. Keane leaned forward. "Then what did you mean to do?" Darren stared at the floor. She was scared, wouldn't stop crying. I just wanted to keep her quiet. His voice cracked once, then steadied again. I didn't want to lose the only person who still looked at me like I mattered. Marie sat across from him 1 week later. It wasn't part of the official process. She requested it, insisted. Keane advised against it, but she needed to know. Darren's hands were cuffed, resting on the cold table between them. He didn't speak first. She did. Why? He didn't look at her. You were her uncle. Still nothing. Then, finally, I didn't plan it. Marie's voice trembled. Then what happened? Darren exhaled. She was upset that morning, said her mom didn't come to church, said she was cold. I found her outside the side door, crying. Marie's eyes welled, but she didn't blink. I brought her inside just for a minute, just to warm her up. He paused. I thought I was helping, and then she panicked, tried to leave. I stopped her. Tears ran down Marie's face. You locked her in. Darren nodded. I was going to let her go, I swear. I waited too long. There was no trial, only a confession and sentencing. He accepted a plea deal to avoid public testimony. Second-degree manslaughter, unlawful imprisonment, tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to 24 years. Marie didn't attend the hearing. She didn't need to. She had already heard what mattered. The town quieted again, not in relief, not in joy, but in a deep, solemn stillness, the kind that settles into bones. St. Mary's sealed off the East Prayer Room permanently, replaced the windows with clear. Payne's built a small memorial in Eliza's name, her photo, her glove, and the words she once wrote in Sunday school etched into stone. Be kind. Be safe. Be home before dark. In the weeks following Darren's confession, Marie's house was silent in a new way, not the silence of waiting, of dread, of absence, but the silence that follows a slammed door, the kind you sit inside, breathing, shallow, unsure if the world is still spinning outside your window. Eliza was gone, and now Marie knew why. She knew who. She knew how. But knowing didn't feel like closure. It felt like another wound. She took down the yellow coat, folded it for the last time, not because she was letting go, but because it had become something else, not just a memory, but a monument to everything that had unraveled. She didn't burn it, didn't bury it. She tucked it inside a cedar chest, alongside the letter Eliza had once written Darren, the photograph from the attic, and the prayer book page. The glove, returned to her by police, she placed on top. Then she closed the lid. Detective Keane stopped. By just once, after the sentencing, no questions, no case notes, just to check in. Marie offered tea, but they both knew the visit wasn't about refreshments. Keane sat across from her on the porch swing, spring sun warming the steps. You were brave, she said softly. Marie shook her head. No, I was desperate. Keane smiled. Sometimes they're the same thing. They sat in silence, the birds arguing gently in the tree above them. Then Keane asked, Do you want to know the rest? Marie turned. There's more. Keane nodded. We found more in his garage. There had been drawings, dozens of them. Not all were Eliza's. Some were from other children, likely collected from community events, church recitals, family gatherings. But Eliza's were the most intact. Her handwriting, her crooked son, her misspelled notes. Keane said they were preserved in plastic sleeves. He had kept them all this time carefully, meticulously.